r/NoSleep. Posted by u/sunkpurse. If you hear the bells, run. They're coming. It all began earlier this year. Or maybe last year. Honestly, I'm not entirely sure. I was home alone, waiting for my family's return. I watched the gentle fog pass by my house. The full moon was bright enough that I could see pretty far down our country road. Ching ching. The sound of bells. A certain kind, almost like the ones you'd expect to hear when Santa flew overhead on a late Christmas Eve night. It was getting louder and louder, and I was beginning to think my parents rented a sled, but for what occasion? There was no snow outside yet. The animals chirped, howled and yelled outside, only becoming silent when the bell rang out. I had just turned around when I heard a knock on the door. A quick slam. Then a banging noise. I rushed and locked the door. Looking through the window I could see a heavily dressed man standing outside the door. He must have heard me breathing somehow because he quickly turned and stared at me through the window. His gaze wasn't natural. He had dark eyes, and a freckled face, bags under his eyes, and grayish-black stubble. His stare went on until I rushed toward the back door to lock it. When I returned to the front door's window, he was gone. I looked in the back as well, but he was not at the back door. I almost thought he may have left until I found the bathroom window shattered, the door wide open, and wet footprints leading away on the carpet. I froze in place. Terrified. Out of nowhere, he appeared behind me and held something against my face. I couldn't resist for long before passing out from it. Day 1. I don't know how long it has been since I'd gotten here, but this was the first full day I had been awake. I woke up in a meat processing room, where large hooks resided on the ceiling, covered in rust and blood. I attempted the door, only to find it locked with various padlocks on the outside. I remember banging on the door while screaming for help. The door swung open, and I was hit by it. The man from before came in with a tray of food and placed it down. After waiting some time, just to be sure I was all right to eat, I ate. It was questionable. The man had left after he placed the food down, and I had just decided to eat it, as I was very hungry, and had no time to question it. The food was not poisoned, luckily, since I had not even considered that. I couldn't see in the dark room, and so I felt around for the plate, even reaching around for a light switch, which I could not find. Time would pass before the bells would ring again, vanishing into the distance. Day 2. I didn't hear bells at all, but I could tell it was a new day, as light shone from under the door. I seemed to be in a shed instead of a house. The light shining led my eyes to a corner filled with blood. I could see something swinging back and forth, but I could not tell what it was. The first day I was here, when it was brighter in here, I did not see anything in that corner, other than a meat hook. I reached over and grabbed hold of the thing, and began lightly pulling on it. The door opened, and a woman stepped inside the room. The light shone in the room and I could see trees in the distance, a storm approaching in the sky. The thing I was tugging on was my mother, hung by her shoulder on a meat hook. Her face was blank and pale, blood splattered on her neck and clothing. I scooted back and felt my heart shrivel. My mother was dead, and I was probably next. But that wasn't all. My father and sister were also in that room, dead. The woman approached and placed down a plate of veggies and eggs. I felt scared, and I didn't have an appetite anymore. I only felt alone and hurt. My family was gone, and I wanted to be with them, not here with these creeps. Day 3. While I was asleep, they must have taken my parents' and sister's bodies inside their house or into the forest. I felt around for my phone since it wasn't on me, and I ended up finding it on the ground, shattered and stabbed. I felt my hope for escaping vanish, and I threw the phone at the wall of the shed. For a second, it shook the walls, and suddenly moaning began from all around me. Outside my shed people begged to be killed, begged to be set free. Some made only growling noises, and I suddenly realized there was other people with me here. Day 4. I felt strange. My body was reacting to the meat they began giving me. My nails seemed to be growing longer and my speech patterns seemed to be screwed up. I began thinking about world peace. And having friends. To be friends with people. I stopped eating, and this feeling began to vanish. Day 5. The woman dropped some kind of phone in my shed. I began using it to try to contact the police, but the phone just rang and rang. The police were not picking up. Day 6. I have no choice but to try to publish my story and hope for help. Day 7. I'm starving. But it's better than eating whatever that meat was. Day 8. Please. Help me. Day 20. I've been taking scraps of food, ignoring the meat. I feel sick. I wanted to go home. I don't want to be like the others. Day 30. The lady spoke for the first time, her husband followed. They talked about being friends while smiling. A boy was behind them. He was speaking to some girl. She claimed to be Emily. Day 31. The boy wants to be friends. He wants me to join his march. Day 32. He promised me freedom. The next story of this video. Posted by u/sunkpurse. The parents of this town aren't explaining the constant deaths. Today, I figured it out. Alright. Her body lay on the ground in front of me. Blood trickling from her wound and onto the floor. Now, I wouldn't say this is much of an average day for me. Should I go back and explain the background of why there is a dead body on my floor, or shouldn't I? Maybe it's best I do. Our town has always been quiet, not in the aspect of no drama, as that would constantly be gossiped about, even happening quite often near me. The kind of quiet I mean is crime. There were no thefts, no deaths, no murders, not even speeding on the highways. Our town has always been this way. Until recently. A girl was found by a creek near the school. Her last conversation was with her mother, who she told she was going for a quick walk. She would never return from that walk, prompting her mother to contact the police, who followed the bread trail of her usual walking path, only to find her off the trail, next to the creek, reaching inside the water as if there were something to save her from whatever killed her. My theory is that some kind of wild animal had gotten to her. After all, I did just explain how our town was quiet, right? Smile. However, the wounds were abnormal, which should prompt an investigation from the police, right? No. Her case was withheld from the press. Any papers that did already have the news on it were confiscated from stores. Only those who bought them were able to keep them. However, her mother also vanished. Her house lying vacant for some time actually. I'm getting a bit off topic. This was only the first incident, of which people didn't think too much of. People held a memorial, and her funeral was also held. Things seemed to return to normal after that, the only change being that curfew was changed to an earlier time, which we all were expecting since she was out past curfew at the time of her death. The nights following her death were quiet, so much so that it bothered me. I didn't know her too much, but I had seen her at our school often, so it hurt to hear of her painful demise, the details of which I was never able to learn. Knock knock. People would hear on their doors at night, a girl's voice echoing from outside their door. Those who opened their doors would be met with, "Ah, you got me." Nobody knows what, because they died. Please note how calm I am, despite the obvious mentioning of death. Which should bother me. The next few deaths were in the homes of the people who opened the door to the girl's voice. Reports from witnesses seem to mention that the girl's voice sounded a lot like the girl who was killed nights ago. When the knocking finally reached my house, I did not open the door. Especially since I was home alone, my parents on a trip, constantly calling me after learning of the deaths around town. The deaths were not disclosed to the public, but one piece of information slipped through. The bodies were drained of their blood, making them look like raisins. Delicious. For the following days, I would sit in my room and just message my friends or play games. I had nothing else to do, since school was now held online, and going outside was becoming harder and harder with the reduced curfew. One night, I spent a couple hours in a call with my friend Andrew. Our conversation went somewhat like this. "You beat the boss yet?" he had asked. "Nope, almost there I believe," I said, stretching my back and listening for a cracking noise. "Well, after you do, there's someone I want you to meet. I'm sure you'll like her." I could already tell Andrew was smiling. "Alright? Does she live around here?" "Yeah, actually, she's the girl who sat alone all the time at school. She recently contacted me because of the curfew. I'm almost kind of relieved I got to her first. Who knows what would have happened if Colton got a hold of her," he said, to which I started to lose focus, no longer to hear what he was saying. Later that night, he did invite Emily to the call. I got along quite well with her. Her usual quiet self was now happy and loud. She seemed to be enjoying herself. "Can I come over sometime?" she asked me after Andrew left the call. "In a time like this? No way. You'll get hurt," I said, wanting to avoid any kind of physical interaction. She didn't take that well. "Why not? I'll be careful," she said, hanging up and not messaging me for a couple of days. Screams. Loud screaming came from my neighbor's house. Something tearing? A ripping noise? Something making a sprinkler noise. The screams ceased. My neighbors ceased. It was the 10th day of this quarantine. The town was slowly going dark, no one exited their homes, my parents no longer returned calls, and Andrew stopped replying to my messages. I felt strange. I never quite felt lonely, as I was always a loner type of kid. I just liked to be alone. Apparently, that's what would save me from what was really happening outside. I contacted some adults from the school, but they just told me everything was fine, and soon we'd all be out of this quarantine. Soon, they too stopped picking up the phone, and so I was left alone with my games. Days would pass. And as so, people would too. Wait? People were passing by my house. I looked through the window and watched one of my teachers sluggishly walk past, looking around slowly. My phone began ringing. Emily. Hey! She yelled into her phone, almost sending my ears off my body. You're all right? Are you seeing the people outside? I asked, turning to close the curtain behind me. Of course. I think everything is fine. Something wasn't right. I should have known from the moment she called. This wasn't Emily. This was someone. Something else. Something that didn't belong. Knock knock. Hey! Can I come in? Emily's voice asked, seemingly in front of my front door. Emily. No. I said, swallowing hard. Hey! Can I come in? She asked again. Emily. Go home. I said, making sure the door was locked. Get away from me. Please. She begged, her voice sounding a little distorted as she began banging on the door. I dropped my phone, which still had the call ongoing. I stepped back as the door burst open and what looked to be Emily stepped inside. She smiled while looking at me, but a feeling told me to run, which I did. Come back. She yelled, giggling as she chased after me, her shape lengthening and her bones cracking as she changed shape. Something tall with long fingers, it began to crawl on all fours, making sniffing noises as it chased me, using a distorted version of Emily's voice, saying things she had said on the phone that night. I closed my parents' door behind me, screaming at it to stop, to which it began copying my voice. The noise stopped, and it knocked on the door to my parents' room. Emily. Go home. It said in my voice, a perfect replica. A perfect creature. I began searching through drawers as it began banging on the door once more. I couldn't find what I was looking for, but I could hear it begin to condense and I could hear Emily once more. The door burst open, and I yanked what I needed to find in the drawer, aiming it at the thing's head. I pulled the trigger. The pistol went off and the creature fell backward, twitching and screeching quite loudly. Emily's body contorted, twisted, and she let out a long and blood-curdling scream once more before her movements ceased. Since that night, I've been home, living off of whatever food I have left. I get the feeling nobody is coming. I've resorted to eating the body. Smile. I'm sorry to ask, and hopefully, there are people still out there. Perhaps this is only happening in my town, but would you mind helping me out? Smile. I really need a way out of this town. Meet new people. And enjoy the views? Please. I'll be waiting for your arrival, my new friends. Smile.